Good morning, people out there in YouTube land. It's me, Andrew Goforth from the Musical Mysteries of the Shed and Don't Bump the Needle. I just wanted to take a minute this morning and let you know what was going on and what we have decided to do and the artistic direction that we've decided to take with this series of videos on Miles Davis Kind of Blue. Yesterday we had a bad storm come through, a couple of tornadoes touched down, a lot of things got busted up and damaged, and that interrupted our video. We realized at the end of that video that we already had about an hour's worth of content and we were only about halfway through. And we don't want to compromise. You know, we want to get this information out there because we feel like it's important and we want to share it. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this Kind of Blue video into a four-part series, and we're going to take our time with it. We've decided that for the integrity of the project and the artistic expression that we want to get out of this, that we need to take our time with this rather than trying to get this all into a 30 or 45 minute video. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to spread this out over 4 videos and give you all a lot more content than we originally expected. Be patient with us. We've had some difficulties around with the weather, and we're having to try to do a whole bunch more editing than we realized because of this. But we're going to get it done. I'm waiting on Shane right now. He'll be here soon, and we're going to get this thing knocked out. I just wanted to share this with you all so you all have an idea of what's going on, and you can look forward to this 4-part series on Kind of Blue. We appreciate all your support, and we'll see you soon. Peace, y'all.
Ooh, yeah. Texas tea.
All right. Good morning, people of the world. How are you today?
What's up?
I'm good right now. Welcome to Don't Bump the Needle, live from Spartanburg County.
Rainy Spartanburg County.
Rainy Spartanburg County. Humid, rainy Spartanburg County. We are here today live from the shed. I am Andrew Goforth. This is Shane Pruitt. How are y'all doing out there in YouTube land on this fine morning? How are you today, Mr. Pruitt?
Peachy keen, man. Peachy keen. Better now.
a little morning medicine.
I ain't no good, y'all.
that'll do the trick, right? Better than coffee. My glasses are fogging up a little bit. It's so humid in here.
Yeah.
All right. So today we're going to talk about Miles Davis. Well, actually, we're going to talk about an album by Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. Yeah, a lot to say. This video may actually be edited into 2 parts depending on how it goes, and also depending on the weather, because we are in a tin roof building, and if the rain comes, you will not be able to hear us.
Huh?
But before we get started, we just want to send a huge thank you to everybody out there who is watching and listening and giving us feedback. We are listening to this feedback, and we are
taking it to heart.
Taking it to heart and trying to make changes as we move forward. But I did want to take a minute and just let you know a little bit about where we're doing this and some of the things that we're thinking about going forward. We understand that the audio is not the greatest, and we're looking into that. There's a lot of things that factor into that, primarily money.
Or the lack of.
Or the lack thereof. But we are looking at different microphone setups and that sort of thing, and hopefully sometime in the near future, if you all continue to support this, we can invest a little bit in a better microphone than the one we are currently using. And that's true for the lights as well. We understand the lighting's not the best. We actually had a friend who let us borrow some different lights, and we experimented with them, and they just wouldn't work in this space. So we had to go back to what we were using, and we apologize. We know they're not the greatest. But they are all we have at the present, so we'll continue to use them until we can do something else. Something else I wanted to mention is we got some feedback about the space that we are recording this in. Just FYI, this is an actual working, functioning shop. You may notice this sewing machine next to me. It's used for doing upholstery.
So get off my lawn.
You may notice the chop saw behind Shane. It's used for building and constructing, and you know, this is an actual working shop. We just like the vibe of it, and that's why we decided to come in here. We know it's not a studio. We know it's not picture perfect, but
It's not supposed to be.
It's not supposed to be, right? But it's got a good feel. It's got a good vibe. And it does, like I said, have a tin roof. So if this rain comes, we're gonna have to do some editing and get back to this on another day. Anything else we need to talk about before we get into this thing, Shane?
We're coming from the hills of Carolina as well.
In the pines.
In the pines.
Yes, we are. We are.
And my baby and I are blind when we drink wine. I don't know.
We are from the foothills of South Carolina, yeah, right here in Spartanburg County, out in the country a little ways.
Where the mountain water meets the red clay. Tell me where we are.
I never had thought about that. That's true. That's true.
Magic here.
So without further ado, let's get into this, and welcome to, I think this is episode number 3 of Don't Bump the Needle, where we're going to look at Kinda Blue by Miles Davis.
It's a cornerstone record for not just jazz, but in my opinion, I think for all of music. It's one of those ones that'll stand the test of time from now on. Yeah,
and some people, you know, this album received some critical feedback when it was released, and so, you know, I would say that it's actually, in the public perspective, has gotten better.
Better, over time.
If that's possible. I don't know that that's possible.
I think it has myself, because there's been enough people who are kind of iconic within the industry that have always used that record as their Desert Island record, you know.
Yeah.
So they all talk about it.
And it definitely would be on my short list of Desert Island albums. And, you know, to me, this album is fascinating because this wasn't really a band before, and it wasn't really a band after.
It was a concept.
It was a concept, and that's where the genius of Miles comes into play, because he had the vision to be able to see.
He just innately knew
how these particular group of musicians and artists would work together,
personally and professionally, you know.
Yeah, and I was reading an article the other night. I think it was Jimmy Cobb that said that, you know, just simply put, this music was made in heaven. Oh yeah. And I know that's a bold statement, but
it's definitely on a higher plane.
You know, I get pushback all the time because I compare music to spirituality.
I do too.
And to me, music is, when it's done right, is as close to godliness as anything you'll find. That's true. And this album personifies that. And
and each of them were doing it at that level too. Every player on the record, you know, not just one.
Well, you know. And just so the people out there know, that was the difficult part about this, because when you start looking at these players, these guys are giants and geniuses, and we could literally do a single episode on every single one of these guys.
Easily.
And we will, if that's what you want. You know, so keep that in mind, because we could spend hours talking about each of these guys, and we're trying to do this in 30 or 45 minutes.
I mean, Bill Evans alone, you know, he's do 2 hours on him and probably not even touch on everything.
Of course,
You know?
of course, absolutely, and
He may be the lesser known of all of them as far as the name.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. So yeah, let's talk about this album a little bit, because the fascinating thing to me is how the spontaneity and the quickness of the recording process of this album.
Miles wanted everything done on the first take. He wanted to capture the magic of the players learning the piece when it's just in its like, that's when all the bulbs, the light bulbs go off, and it's like that's really where the magic happens. When you start doing it more takes, it loses that. You ever think it?
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think every track except for Flamenco Sketches is a first take.
That one's the second take.
And that one was the
Yeah.
second take, which which is kind of ironic, because when you look at this album, it was recorded over 2 days, March 2nd.
Think about that.
March 2nd and April 22nd, 1959. 2 days. They went in, laid down 5 tracks, 45 minutes of music, and it's as close to perfection
as you're ever going to
as you're ever going to hear.
Especially for jazz.
Yeah, absolutely. And this thing was recorded in New York City at Columbia Studios, at the old 30th Street Studios there in New York City. Again, recorded in 2 days.
Now people go and take 6 months to even do half a record for some folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's been 6 months just on the production.
I know, right?
And that's the thing.
We don't have any tracks yet.
There's the production on this is they didn't have to produce.
That's it. They just went and played it.
Hit record, and that was what they had.
Make sure the microphones are set up in the right place.
Yeah, this
Capture room.
This idea of production is not even really part of the conversation.
Sounds like paying taxes.
When you're talking about this album.
You know?
And again, that goes back to the beauty of it to me, is how the genius of Miles Davis again, be able to see in his mind's eye how this was going to work.
He was a visionary, man. He knew exactly. He was the perfect puzzle maker or puzzle guy. I mean, he knew innately from the get-go what players were going to work personally, spiritually, and then musically.
Yeah.
And he just knew, man. I mean,
yeah, he
and
did.
there's been a few of those people that have come through the last 100 years to say that just completely were just honest in themselves and honest with what they did, man. And it kind of transcends.
Yeah, and we'll get into that as we start talking about these players and how their styles, because they weren't all.
They're completely polar opposites.
They were all jazz guys, but they all had different influences and different styles that they played in. But Miles was able to envision how that all would come together.
Well, it was the perfect yin yang of each of them. Look at Cannonball Adderley, his style of playing saxophone. Listen to Coltrane's. They're completely polar opposites.
Yeah, absolutely. They are.
Cannonball had that more sanctification sound where he wanted to hit a note and do that number, and then you had Train over here with a darker tone, more harmony, more melodic. Outside even in his playing and approach.
Yeah, one of the important things to talk about when you talk about this album, again, we talked about the production or lack thereof. Something else I want to talk about is the lack of funding and the lack of budget that these guys had to work with. We're talking less than $2,000.
The whole thing.
To create this album. There was they had allotted 9 hours of studio time, 4 reels of tape, and a fee to pay the piano tuner.
The tuner, you're right.
To come in and tune the piano.
Well, that's because it's union up there, and you have to.
And that was the budget, and all of these guys were paid union scale pay, which was next to nothing, especially when you consider the amount of albums that have been, 5 million albums just in the United States alone.
It's a lot of records for jazz, man. It's a lot of
That's
records.
a lot of records for anybody.
But I mean, think about jazz, though, man. I mean, that's unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably so far ahead of the next one behind it. I mean, seriously, if you think about it.
And I don't know what the next one is. If I had to guess, it probably would be Coltrane's Love Supreme.
Love Supreme.
But I don't know off the top of my head how many that album has sold. Or it might be, it might be Dave Brubeck. I don't know.
That too could be,
and that's the irony, is that Dave Brubeck's album came out the same
Sure did.
year
They did.
as this.
They were trying to see which direction jazz
You
was going
know,
to go at that
and
time.
in my opinion, they're polar opposites of what the jazz world
Absolutely.
is.
But the one thing that Brubeck and Miles both had was that coolness factor. They both had that cool thing about them.
Yes, they did.
You know?
Yes, they did. So yeah, you know, it's fascinating because when you look at this album and you look at the fact that of the people that were on it, John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Paul Chambers, three of the biggest names in the business. They got paid $250
I know.
for these recordings.
For the two sessions.
And that's, you know, that just blows my mind. But here's what blows my mind even more is you take somebody like Jimmy Cobb or Bill Evans, who we'll talk about Bill Evans and the importance that he played in this album.
Without him, it doesn't happen.
You know, he's credited with two of the co-writes on
Yeah,
this,
he
and in
actually
my
did.
opinion, it shouldn't even be a co-write, especially on Flamenco Sketches.
Yep.
Because that was taken from a song that he did known called Peace Piece
That's right.
on
Yep.
an album that he had already recorded.
Yep. I mean, it's without that record, without Bill Evans, this record does not get made.
Yeah, and you know, he got Jim and Jimmy Cobb got $150 to
Yep.
record this album, and Bill Evans got $25 a piece for his
For
co-write
songs.
on the two songs, which would have been
Sold 5
Blue
million
and Green
copies.
and Flamenco Sketches.
Sold 5 million copies, make
Yeah.
$25
Yeah.
a piece, $50.
You know,
Oh my man, what is going on with the world?
it's mind-boggling. And then you have Wynton Kelly, and granted, he only played on one song, but he only got paid $75 for that one song.
It's a good thing he wouldn't get paid by the note. You know.
Well, he might have been.
I mean, it could have been, yeah, right. But the thing, you know, the thing I loved about researching that was Miles took the less money of any of them. So
Yeah.
it says everything about him.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
me.
yeah. I mean, I think he got like $130 or
Yeah,
something for that
exactly.
album, and you know, I don't know, you know, in the long run how royalties worked out, and if he ever received any money on top of that for
He
the
had to.
5 million that were sold.
Just without some of the stuff I've read years ago, even without Miles Davis, Columbia Records would not be in existence. He pretty much helped set that company up from
Yeah.
the get-go in the early '50s.
Yeah,
And you know, later on, you know, he had a expense account that he would go in there and he could pretty much get any money. Anytime he needed money, he'd go in there and get any amount he wanted.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. And so, I mean, you know, these guys didn't get paid a lot of money
No.
to do this masterpiece of work, and unfortunately.
Not like the rock and roll world.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think any of them ever, other than Miles, probably ever received anything further, other than that.
Not from this recording.
Yeah, initial
Not
pay
bad.
that they got, which, you know, how much money has that album generated? Selling 5 million copies.
That's up there, man.
You know, it's
Yeah.
a lot. It's a lot.
Somebody got rich. It wasn't the artist.
Yeah, that's obvious. And now one of the things that this album is credited with is sort of being the introduction of this idea of modal jazz,
Mhm.
which was a new form of playing.
Because modal playing was pretty much, you know, up until this era, was pretty much you only heard it over in like Eastern Indian music. The drone, you know, that thing, the modal stuff. That's all Eastern stuff.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not a proficient musician, but I understand it a little
You
bit.
did, man.
You know, the change was rather than playing over scales.
It was playing over changes,
That-
chord changes. They were played over modes.
Yeah, they were playing over modes, and I think that there was a guy by the name of George Russell who and we'll talk about him because he's sort of the unsung hero to all of this.
There again, without him, this record doesn't happen.
It would not exist. But I think what he was doing was learning to stack these scales
Stack them up.
on the fifths.
That's right.
Which then created an infinite window for the players to play in and around
Just like cascading water or something. I don't know. It's just
without the construct of having to go back to the chord.
That's it.
Which was found in all popular music. at
all
that time.
music. You know, even today.
Well, unless you go to like Indian music
Sure,
or some of
but
this.
you know what I'm saying, as far as Western culture.
Absolutely, Western
Yeah.
culture for certain.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, and this album is considered to be the introduction to modal jazz, but that's sort of a misnomer because Miles' first attempt at this modal jazz was on the previous album, Milestone,
Mhm.
and that title track, Milestone,
Milestone,
was
right.
where he first began to implement this George Russell model
theory or whatever,
of modal
yeah.
jazz.
Mhm.
And like I said, we'll get into who George Russell is in a little bit because we could do a whole show on
I
him.
know. And I'd never heard of him before till we started doing this research on this.
Well, and that's, I kind of felt a little bit like I had missed the boat, so to say. Not only on him, but in a certain degree, Bill Evans.
Me too
I'd
as
heard
well.
my father talk about Bill Evans for years and had never
Delved in. didn't
never spent enough time in it to realize the importance of what he did and
I mean,
the
there's so
impact that
many.
he did as a that he had as a player.
And just as a human being, it sounds like,
yeah. I mean, and if we want to, we could start with Bill.
Yeah,
as
we'll
we
start
get
with
into
him.
this
Sure.
and just go from there because in my opinion he like we said he gets a co-write credit on 2 of these tracks.
The guy was a genius. He was just a complete
The guy
genius.
was a genius, and
on every
Miles created this situation around his style of
Absolutely
playing.
did. Mhm.
So he was sort of the catalyst.
He was a catalyst, yeah.
To all of this vision that Miles was seeing, and Bill Evans lived a tragic life.
He was a tortured soul.
He was born William John Evans. I think he was born in 1929, and didn't live very long. Died in 1980.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a minute too. He was from New Jersey.
Joycey.
Yeah, Jersey, but was essentially a musical genius.
I think he was just a genius on every level, man. Because
Probably
he was,
so.
researching, you find out all these little odd quirks about him, the things, his interests, things he was, really interested in, and he was proficiently just as technically or whatever, just as good at everything he ever studied as he was his instrument.
Yeah,
you know?
and it said that at a very early age, by like the age of 6, that he had an uncanny ability
So he's already sight reading.
to read and absorb all of these different styles of music,
Yeah.
and then to be able to replicate it. And
Because he started out, what was the instrument he started out? He started out with a piccolo or something like, I can't remember, some wind instrument.
yeah, he went through several different instruments, I think,
He
before
did,
before
yeah.
he landed on the piano.
Before he was like 12. I mean, he
Yeah.
had mastered them,
But it's really strange because you hear a lot of people say that he viewed himself as not having much musical talent.
That's the artist in him. He's never good enough.
And they say that his drive to compensate for his lack of talent was otherworldly, and that he would spend 12, 14 hours a day
Focused.
practicing.
That's a different
You know,
ball game right
working-
there, baby. Yeah, I mean,
working on his stuff.
his craft. Yeah.
Yeah, and to see that kind of drive in someone, especially at such an early age,
It was something he was born with.
and someone who thinks they have no talent. If I think I have no talent, I'm not sure I'm going to spend that much time working on something.
Well, it's also he was such a Zen master though too. Reading about him, he was the guy.
Yeah, he was, and he's a classically trained
Yeah.
musician. He studied at Southeastern Louisiana State,
Yep.
I think around 1950, and was heavily influenced by the classics. Debussy, Stravinsky, all of those guys,
all the classics.
and was known for turning Miles Davis on to that
Mm-hmm.
type of stuff and allowing a space for Miles to embrace
His thing.
this white
Yeah,
European
yeah.
classical music that Miles sort of discarded a little bit
Yeah, he did.
at certain points in his career. But
Yeah.
this is the guy that opened up that window
Yep.
to be able for Miles to be able to say, "Oh, wow, there's something going on."
And
here.
he did that his whole life. He was that guy. Did that his whole life to other artists.
Yeah, he did, and so he studied at Southeastern Louisiana State, and then in '55 he moved to New York City and enrolled in Mann's College of Music, where he continued, this classical training, which ended up translating into this world of jazz
Mm-hmm.
in a way that,
There's before him and there's after him.
yes,
And then it's never been done after him. It's only him, really.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
In my opinion, I mean,
And in 1956, he released his first album called New Jazz Concepts.
as a trio, piano trio, which is unheard of back then. Nobody did that.
Yeah.
And he set the template for any kind of piano trio from then on.
And he spent a lot of time working in that trio format.
They sure did,
And
man.
Was
Well, it's compact. It's if you travel, it's compact, and then there's only it's 3 miles to feed.
yeah.
Make more money.
Yeah, and here's the thing that like fascinated me is that this guy recorded more than 50 albums
It's unbelievable.
and won 5 Grammys.
And
Which,
he's
you know,
unheard
you
of.
can take the Grammys for what they are, but for a jazz guy to
I
come
know.
in and win 5 of them,
With all the heavy hitters that are in jazz.
yeah, yeah. But where he really became key in this recording of Kinda Blue is in 1956. He met George Russell, who we'll talk about a little bit later on, and began playing and studying under George Russell. And George Russell had written a book called The Lydian Chromatic Concepts, which was the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of this modal jazz,
Yep.
and became, you know, viewed as sort of like the Bible
Oh yeah, it is. It's like it's quite the cornerstone of it.
for this
Yep.
type of playing. And it was through George Russell that he was introduced to Miles Davis,
Yep.
which then that relationship, you know, turned into one of, in my opinion, one of the most creative relationships probably in the history of music.
Without a doubt.
You know, there was a period of time, like in less than a year's time, where those two recorded,
Oh, I know.
I think
yeah.
it was 9 or 10 albums
I know,
together.
And like how many records did he do in a year?
It was 9 or 10.
Yeah,
if I'm not
that's
mistaken.
right. Yeah, that's what I'm
You
thinking
know,
of.
in
Yeah.
less than a year.
Think about it.
Him
That's
and-
it.
him
That's
and
right.
Miles were
6
able-
weeks, man. You know.
Right.
Yeah, 5 weeks. Man. That's unbelievable.
And when you think about that in the context of today's music, where
Oh, it's
you
not
know an
happening.
artist can get out an album, you know, every 2 years.
I mean, I'm an artist nowadays. If they do 10 records, they've got a long career. We're talking 20, 30 years.
yeah.
You know, 10 records.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you know, the downside to this is that, you know, you have this genius of a person who was a little bit very quiet
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit reclusive guy
Yeah.
who went into the studio with Miles Davis and recorded this album that just shattered everybody's preconceived notions of what not only jazz but music,
Music could be. Right, yeah.
And you know, that had a little bit of a detrimental effect on him, and it led him into a lifestyle that
Well, he was just a product of the environment too, because they were all using back then.
yeah, you know, and he got heavily
Parker's the one that
he
started
got-
that for everybody,
Yeah, he got heavily strung out on cocaine and heroin,
and fought it the rest of his life.
and fought it the rest of his life. You know, but this is a guy that influenced any
And
piano
everybody.
player that came after him, from Herbie Hancock to Chick Corea to Keith Jarrett
Yeah.
to anybody.
I mean, he's the one that got Coltrane interested in Eastern philosophy. I mean, that's what Train's known for now, really,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah, and we'll get into that when we get to Coltrane, because you know that's, to me, that's when you're willing to investigate those types of worlds and spaces. It's telling me something about how your mind works.
Absolutely, man.
And it's a, you know, to me it's a beautiful thing when you have an open enough mind
And heart as well.
to
Yeah.
go in
Yeah.
and look at those types of things that are different.
Yeah, I mean, but just like for a guy like Coltrane, which is such a spiritual cat, you know, you don't play that way without being spiritually like sound in some ways.
Yeah.
For him to listen to a guy like Bill Evans and say, hey, try this out, man. You're open enough to, you know, check this out. And he did. He took to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Now
then-
here's the thing here, and this is really the beauty of music to me, is that Bill Evans was a white man,
No barriers.
and Miles Davis got a lot of pushback.
Sure did.
Because he was a white man.
Yep.
You know, and he was a white man coming and playing what many considered to be a black form of art
Hmm.
in jazz.
But it takes both.
It
does.
absolutely
It has
does
to.
that.
Yeah.
You know, yes, you can say that jazz is a black art form. I don't think many people would argue,
No, they wouldn't.
but you can't say that it would exist in isolation,
No, it wouldn't.
because had it not been for these European
Well, I mean, exactly.
pieces and these African pieces coming together in New Orleans,
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's it. It starts in New Orleans.
it starts in
It
New
goes from
Orleans.
there.
You know,
Goes up the river.
that none of this music that we have could have existed in isolation.
Nope.
It just wouldn't have done
It's a
it.
perfect storm.
You know, so Miles showed this throughout his career with the people that he chose to play with. He didn't give a shit.
No, if you could play, that was
If
all.
you could play,
That's all he cared about.
You know,
Yeah, that's it.
and I know that a lot. This upset a lot of black folks, and you know, I've struggled with myself. You know, oftentimes, you know, wondering as a white man, why is it that the music that I want to engage with is predominantly African American music?
That's always been me. That's just because that's what your soul wants to hear. It's a vibration. That's just, you know,
Yeah. And,
I think.
you know, the other question that comes out of this is who are we to question the artist?
I mean, really,
You know, you and I are both artists in our own way.
Yeah.
And that's one of my pet peeves is when somebody tells me how to do my art.
But of course, you're always
You know,
going to have everybody that can't do it and tell you how to do it.
If that's what you want to do, you go and do your own art.
That's right.
You know, and as a consumer, we sometimes get this entitled view in our head where we think these artists owe us something.
That's just it. They do. That's just what the layman's feel like.
And the reality is they don't owe us anything. The only thing they owe is to their own art.
Damn right.
And if it's playing with a white man, then who am I to question that from somebody with the genius and the vision of Miles Davis?
I mean, I hate to say, but even in the early 2000s, I've always played with black guys, man, all my life. Playing music, and I can't tell you this. Even going out into a restaurant in South Georgia and getting looks, you know, it's pretty sad, really. In like the early 2000s, not that long ago.
Yeah, and you know, we talked about this in our Lead Belly episode too, and it's gonna be a recurring theme probably in almost every thing that we do.
It needs to be talked about.
You know, because these guys were doing this in the 50s.
Yep.
When race relations were
terrible.
You know, I mean, violent to the point of violence throughout the nation, and rightfully so. You know, because sometimes that's the only way people begin to listen.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know.
But yeah, so you know, Bill Evans was, in my opinion, one of the linchpins to this whole record. But yet so many people wanted to push back and criticize Miles,
of course,
because he was a white man, rather than just embracing the vision and artistic genius that Miles had.
And they were also, you know, picking on Miles a little bit, you know, because like it's that thing of like, oh, you're the tough guy in the corner, and all of a sudden now you bring in somebody that's a weakling, and then so he must be a weak, so let's go try him out, you know. It's that kind of vibe. Too,
yeah. Well, and the strange part about it is that people didn't know he was white at first.
They didn't. It's just like Chuck Berry, you know, when he showed up for the gig, they're like, I thought you were, you know.
Yeah, you know, so when all they did is cut off these assumptions and biases and prejudices that they have and listen to
their
music.
Eyes, not their ears.
You know, and listen to the music. There was nothing there to push back on until the reality of him being a white man was made
Wait
evident.
a minute, you know.
You know, so that shows us. That shows our flaws as a species.
Absolutely, man.
And our ability to judge people based solely on the appearance.
Yep.
And that, you know, that's the sad reality, especially in this country.
And it's all that stuff's taught. It starts at home, you know, as children.
Oh, it's absolutely learned. 110% agree
And
with that.
then once they get in the school system, then it really takes over, and because they see the kids around them doing it. And,
yeah. So you know, that's Bill Evans. You know, and again, we can do a whole episode on Bill Evans.
That was a Cliff Notes version of it.
If y'all want us to, you just let us know, and I would be glad to spend some more time looking into the life of Bill Evans, because he lived a tragic life. You know, he didn't live a very long life. There's a horrible story about him having to watch his wife commit suicide by throwing herself in front of a bus or a train?
Train.
You know, and I think
his
that
brother died at the same time. You know, that right before that.
Yeah, he lost. There was a point in his career where he almost stopped playing because he lost the bass player in his trio
early on.
And you know, it hit him so hard. You know, so he lived a tragic life. He lived the life of a genius, unfortunately.
Yeah, just a hardened blues man. I mean, really, just that soul out here by himself, and he's fighting against the world, man. Man, it definitely probably he portrayed those feelings through his music, and whatnot. But man, that's a hard thing.
That's a
man.
hard thing. And one other little tidbit, we were talking about this relationship between the races and how it shows in music. There's a quote somewhere where he was asked about how he was treated, as far as racism and that sort of thing goes, being this white man in this jazz world. And he's quoted as saying that he never felt any racism from the musicians.
Not the musicians.
That the only people he felt issues from were the audience.
Yep.
And again, that goes back to this idea that these musicians were able, and you'll see that in all American music,
Yeah.
whether it's in Memphis, whether it's
Look at Stax Records. I mean,
the
Yeah.
musicians had the sense and the openness and the kind heart to look past.
well, there's only, in my opinion, there's only three kinds of people, man. There's good, there's bad, and there's not so good. Somebody teeters or whatever, but still probably ain't too good. If you got to think about it.
Yeah, we just can't get
That's
that
exactly right. It's all you got that
our
drives
own
it.
constructs a lot to realize
And,
that.
and these technology stuff plays a big part of that now.
Yeah.
Just bombarded with it.
Yeah, so that's Bill Evans in a really, really small nutshell. And again, if you want us to spend some more
I'm in
time,
a nutshell.
if you want us to spend some more time on him, comment below and let us know. And be sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button and share this thing with your friends.
That's right.
And let's keep this thing going. All right, so that's Bill Evans, and this is my first episode of Kinda Blue.
First of four.
First of four. The next one coming up, I think we're going to focus primarily on Cannonball Adderley and Mr. John Coltrane. So you guys stay tuned. Remember to hit that like button, to share this thing, to comment, subscribe, and let's keep this thing rolling. We do appreciate it. You all have a good day out there in this wonderful world we live in. We'll see you soon. Peace, y'all.